The other day I was working with a student and we were playing a get to know you activity, and one of the questions that I asked him was, what is something that you have learned recently? And keep in mind, this is a student who's spending, hours and hours every day in school. And his response was, I don't know that I've learned anything recently. And I was like, you haven't learned anything at all? And it got me thinking about the fact that learning is an active process. It's something that we have to intentionally choose into. We can't just show up to information and expect that we're going to gain something from it. And upon talking with the student a little bit more, he revealed to me that he had been noticing things and that he hadn't quite put together the things he was noticing with lessons that he was learning. And so he shared with me that he had noticed that at sports practice that there were certain students or certain players who would hog the ball, and as a result he recognized that he didn't like that. And I was like, so it sounds like you might have an opportunity for something that you're learning there. What do you feel like you're learning? And he was like, I just feel like sharing is something that is really important and it makes it more enjoyable for everyone. And I was like, see, you are learning something. And so it was that moment of realizing for him that he is learning, but it's an intentional thought process that we have to engage in. And much in the same way, we very often show up to life and we just go through the motions, or we are so busy that we don't take the time to stop and reflect and to stop and pay attention to what life is trying to teach us. It's really important to make space for learning, because if not, we get stuck in the same cycles where we repeat things over and over again and expect different results. And as the kind of classic quote goes, doing something over and over again, expecting a different result, is the definition of insanity. And to whatever degree that quote is actually accurate is debatable, but what's certainly true is that if we continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, more than likely we're going to find ourselves frustrated. And so learning, again, requires some intentionality, whether that is in a formal setting. You can't just show up to a classroom or show up to a book that you're reading or show up to a YouTube video that you're trying to learn something from without doing something intentional to take something away. Something that I like to do is to take notes all the time, whether I'm watching an interesting Instagram reel from somebody I respect and admire, listening to a podcast. Even if I never come back to those notes, the process of taking notes has been proven in research to actually help retain information. Another thing that I always try to do is to take a practical step based on what I've learned. So it might look like, if I've learned something from a podcast, figuring out how can I apply this to my life in the next week or in the next month. And if I try it one time and it doesn't work for me, then I've learned that it doesn't work for me, but I may find that it is really applicable to my life. Another way that I find that learning is something that's really helpful that I can actively engage in is simply sharing it with somebody else and having even just a brief conversation with them. I love to share podcasts with friends or share YouTube videos or Instagram reels that are really informative and helpful to my life. And when I do this, I find that it stimulates further conversation, further thoughts, further practical applications too. So all of that to say, regardless of where you're at in life or what you find yourself learning, make sure that you are doing what you can to make the most of those learning opportunities, because one thing is for sure, life will continue to present us with lessons, and we have to decide what kind of student we want to be. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Voice Memos from a Therapist. I'm Graham McBride, a licensed professional counselor associate, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss our next memo when it comes out, always on Monday mornings. Just a reminder, the content in these podcasts is just my own opinions. They should not be considered therapeutic counsel or advice. And as always, I reserve the right to continue to learn and grow, as I hope that we all are. If you have further questions, feel free to find me on social media at gmc.counseling. This podcast is also available on YouTube if you're more of a video person, along with some longer form content. And finally, if you would like to learn more about what was discussed today, you can find more details in the show notes. As always, I hope you have an amazing day.